So hello, we're back again for the panel number 7. The panel number 7 will discuss the inner game of the goalkeeper. At the moment, we have panel John DeBenedictis will be moderating the panel. We have also Paul Dolan and then Gaspar. We are waiting for to get in. We'll start the conversation either way, and hopefully Tony will get in touch with us and get into this discussion. So I'm going to introduce first Paul Dolan.
Hello.
Hello, Paul. How are you?
Good, Ricardo. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. Now, Dan. Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Now, I will introduce now John. John will be moderating this panel. Hello, John.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is it okay? Yes, perfect.
I'm okay. I was just on the phone with Tony Waiers, who's trying to get hooked on. Hopefully we'll get him soon.
Okay. I will try to help him out to get into the panel. In the meanwhile, John, I suggest that you start the debate, the conversation. I would like to thank Paul, Dan, and John, of course, to be here with us. We have Tony Waiers now getting in, so I'm going to get out, and I'm going to put Tony in. Okay, guys? See you in a bit. See you in 45 minutes, okay?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Hey, John.
Doing great, John.
Great. Just thought I'd do a quick intro. I'm the executive director for National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada. I've also written a book called The Last 9 Seconds, The Secrets of Scoring Goals. But I played as a goalkeeper. And the book is based
combination.
Yeah, it's based on psychology, the psychology of scoring from a goalkeeper's point of view. And so I'm absolutely excited to have 3 gentlemen on the panel. Tony Waiers, who we were waiting for, was the national coach for Canada, the only coach that has taken Canada's men's team to a World Cup. And he's also coached with the Vancouver Whitecaps and played on the English national team. On that first team was Paul Dolan, who played for Canada, and he was the first keeper to play in a World Cup in 1986 for Canada. So welcome, Paul. Great to have you.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
And then we've got Dan Gaspar, who has been a goalkeeper coach. He played goalkeeper, but you've also worked with the Portuguese national team, a number of years with the Iranian national team. I've seen you at presenting at conventions in the NSCAC or the United Soccer Coaches Convention many times, and you probably have a long list, but I'll keep it to that, and maybe you can add later. But welcome, Dan.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
So the first question, I'm going to have to wait till we get Tony on. I see him coming in and out. So the one thing about goalkeeping, as you probably know, it's a highly psychologically based position. And what I mean by that is, I don't think there's any other position on the field where if you make a mistake, the other team pretty much scores a goal. And that's it can be very stressful. Some goalkeepers can handle it in different ways, and just your own experience from that perspective. How were you able to handle the stress as a goalkeeper? And then the next question I'll ask is, how do we coach young players? So, Paul, let's start with you.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I did feel the pressure of being a goalkeeper for the exact reason that you said there, John, is that you knew that if your team made a mistake, you were likely to concede a goal that meant your team wouldn't win, particularly when you played for Canada for many years. We were a team that didn't generate a lot of goals going the other way. And so I was nervous, truthfully. And I think a lot of goalkeepers, first and foremost, don't admit to that nervousness. And I had a good conversation. I remember one time when I was rooming with Craig Forrest, and I always felt, surely he doesn't feel the nerves. And Pat Onstead, the same thing when I was the goalkeeper coach with Canada. We had conversations, and you do feel them. So I think the first thing to recognize is that it is a stress-filled position. And then what can you do about it to mitigate those nerves that you sometimes feel? I know that there's some keepers that maybe don't feel the stress or the pressure. But I know with the national team that each of us in any case, felt that, that desire to do well for your team, and you don't want to be the player that lets down the rest of your teammates. So I think that's the first thing that's important, is recognizing that the mental part of goalkeeping, I think, is more important than the physical part. And so when you recognize that there are going to be stresses going into a game, how do you work against those? How do you help to mitigate them, as I say? And I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more happen nowadays, and certainly with John Herdman's national team now, is the use of mental coaches and what they can do to goalkeepers in those situations. It's a much bigger question, of course, but I'll start with that as something that you've addressed there that is prevalent in the game at every level, I would think, and maybe isn't talked about as much as it should be.
Yeah, I agree. Dan?
Well, John, first of all, I'd like to thank NSCAC and also Soccer Hub. I'm grateful for the invitation. Also, I admire this prestigious panel that you put together. So thank you very much for allowing me to participate in the inner game of the goalkeeper, which I think is extremely important. Out of all the components, I think it's the most important, the psychological component. Unfortunately, it's probably the one that's least understood, and very rarely do we focus on how goalkeepers deal with mistakes and how they deal with conceding goals. I mean, if the biggest secret that separates winners from losers is how they process failure, and they can choose it to destroy them, or they can choose it to view it as a gift meaning that they learn and they grow and they develop from that mistake or conceding a goal. As goalkeepers, as Paul very well know, and as you, John, and once Tony gets on, I mean, that distance when that ball crosses that goal line to the back of the net, it's only a few feet, but it seems like it takes an eternity. And what happens when we concede a goal? Well, typically the embarrassment, the shame, the pulse rate goes up, the heart rate goes up, the head drops, the shoulders droop, the feet get heavy. And I'm sure you guys are all relating to this, because that's usually the process a goalkeeper goes through when they make a mistake or concede a goal. So as goalkeeper coaches and educators, it's extremely important that we guide and nurture and teach our goalkeepers how to process and how to overcome. When I was younger and I was a goalkeeper that gave up goals, I was the worst example of that, Paul and John. I would come home, I didn't want to have dinner, I'd lock myself in the room, I would be disappointed, angry, resentment, and I woke up the next day and the score was no different, no matter how much I beat myself up. So today I try to teach to learn and grow, and there's all sorts of ways and techniques that we can teach goalkeepers to process and to overcome that.
Yeah, great answer. And how does a coach, possibly who's never played in goal, deal with his athletes, especially some of the younger athletes? I know when I'd let in a goal, everyone's coming to you, oh, don't worry about it, or sometimes they want to look at you if it's costing the game. So as a coach, how would you recommend dealing with younger athletes in particular? Because I think most of our audience are dealing with youth.
Sure. I mean, it's a process. First, what I tried to teach is a process, and that is, number one, you accept that you can't change what just happened. So acceptance is a huge factor in the formula of bouncing back, because the team is depending on you to recover and to be there when they need you again. And in order to do that, there's a process that I believe you should go through. Number one, you control your breathing. You inhale the positive energy and you exhale the waste. You get the ball out of the net as quickly as possible. You get your body moving as quickly as possible. There's different techniques. Some goalkeepers like to clap their hands and they squeeze that mistake and that goal out of their body. Some goalkeepers like to bend down, pick up a piece of grass, and once they control their breathing and they get that into a normal state, then they release the grass. That releases the mistake. I also like to teach you pick a spot on the field, wherever that may be, but it's got to be something that's permanent, in particular in away games, Your home field you're usually comfortable with, but you pick a spot and that's your source of strength. It's your source of forgiveness. It's when something good happens, you look at it and it encourages you to move on. And if you make a mistake, it's a spot that also allows you to forgive yourself and move on. And, you know, these things only work if you train them. If you want to develop your muscles in your body, we can't neglect the most important muscle in our body, which is our brain. And most of us and most young athletes, unfortunately, the brain is their enemy and not their friend. We speak on average 200 words a minute, and that self-conversation that we have is the most important that we have. So in order to be a goalkeeper coach, a goalkeeper educator, or a coach of field players, it makes no difference, because field players also make mistakes and fail in opportunities that they should pursue successfully. So these are just some of the things that I think I'd like to share with young goalkeepers in terms of rebounding and bouncing back from mistakes. They have to pay their mental dues, and there's others, and I'd like to get Paul involved, so I'm not consuming up most of our time here.
No, that's great insight, and some of those things were things that I learned to do, in particular in a period around 1996, 1997 with Dr. David Cox, who works now with the Whitecaps and who worked with the Canadian national team at the time, and Bob Leonarduzzi brought him into the squad. And you'll often get senior players in particular who say, wow, this, the mental part of the game, and it's particularly field players, because they don't know what it's like to be a goalkeeper. They might not realize the importance of it. But working with David Cox, one thing that he really simplified for me that I thought helped me in some international matches that followed this period. I remember one in particular against Jamaica, a home game, where you focus on the process. And I know that many people may have heard of this before. You focus on the process rather than the outcome, because you can't account for the external factors. There's nothing you can change about a referee's decision, the away crowd throwing stuff at you or otherwise, the dodgy pitch, or the fact that you've just conceded a goal. At that point, it's all about what do you do next? How do you prepare for the next shot? And it's funny, because I have a young hockey goaltender son as well. So as much as I'm working with Canada's national goalkeepers and trying to relay some of this information to them to help, I'm also doing it with a young hockey goalie and saying some of these same things. And I remember one thing that I said to Pat Onstad after he'd given up a goal against Jamaica in a home fixture in a World Cup qualifier. And, he was really upset by it, as he would be, because it was the goal that cost us the game. And in some ways cost us, without throwing blame on one player, the chance to qualify in the Hex. And that's again comes down to how difficult it is to be a goalkeeper, in particular with a national team, because of how important each game is. But what I said to him was, over the course of a club season, where you're playing, let's say, a 34-game season, I know, because of the quality of a Pat Onstad, that in 31 or 32 of those games, he will play well or very well. And in 2 games, he'll have bad games. It's just the law of averages. His number is much higher with the 30 or 31 out of 34 than an average keeper, of course. But it's just inevitable that you will make mistakes in 3 or 4 games. They're going to cost your team the game, likely as well. But if you focus on the process and you know that that's going to happen, you can kind of, again, account for it without it throwing everything into turmoil. But if you can somehow continue to focus on, how do I set my body for the next shot? How do I keep my feet moving? That was another thing that David Cox spoke about a lot, is focusing on 3 or 4 or 5 words that, as Dan alluded to, draws you back to what's happening on the field. So for me, it was feet. That meant keep my feet moving to get myself into a better position. Focus was another one, to keep ultimate concentration. So again, something that he talked about, which may be focusing something on the side of the stadium or whatever it is, but not to get distracted by the crowd or by what the referee's doing. And these things that just drill down into your day-to-day basics of what you're doing on the field, I found were really helpful.
And I like to jump back on that as well, because you're bringing up So many good points, Paul, about, what can you control and what you can't control, and focus on the things that we can control. And, oftentimes, we reflect on the past, which we can't change. We know the future is not guaranteed to anybody. It's really the now, that focus. And one of the other techniques that I try to share with goalkeepers that I work is the magic object of the game is the ball, and I'll often ask goalkeepers, what's inside this ball? And they tell me, well, it's air. And for me, it's much more than that. It's your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, whatever targets and goals or objectives that you've charted out for yourself along with others who are monitoring you. That's what's inside that ball. And I work on a focus activity where you take a ball, let's say you're in your bedroom and you put it on a bureau and you look at that ball for 5 minutes and you say ball, ball, ball repetitively to yourself 5 minutes. Most people would say that's easy, but in fact, it's very complicated because within that 5-minute process, John, there's all kinds of distractions coming in. The good concentrators are the ones that are able to stop the distractions and get back into the now. The next step is now you have people walking in and out of your room and you still have to maintain your focus on the ball, which is what the game is about, distractions. The next step is you put the TV on, people in and out, 5 minutes focusing on the ball and see if you can avoid distractions. Finally, you put your best music on, you got the TV on, you got people walking in and out, and to focus on that magic object for 5 minutes without allowing anything else to seep in is a process, and it only gets better with time. Hey, Tony, welcome.
Yeah, we made it finally.
Finally got Tony on. Welcome, Tony. We were just talking about the stress on keepers, mistakes that they make, how it can affect their game, and methods of coaching young players into hopefully solving those stress problems and being able to continue. So welcome on board. Like I said at the start, Tony was the goalkeeper. Was a goalkeeper with the English national team, and also the Canadian national men's coach and the first and only coach to take Canada to a World Cup. And funny enough, we have his goalkeeper, Paul Dolan, who played in the first game that Canada ever played in the World Cup in '86 in Mexico. So we're reuniting coach and player. And Tony, you made an interesting decision to play Paul in that first game against France in Mexico. And at the time, if I'm not mistaken, Paul was the youngest keeper to ever play in a World Cup match.
Yes.
That's a pretty bold move for you to make. Maybe give us your thoughts on that.
Well, at that time, Paul, I think you just turned 20, haven't you?
That's right.
And when you think about it, and Dan will concur, goalkeepers get better with age, and 19 and 20-year-old goalkeepers, it's quite an ordeal for them. But what had happened is that Tino Lettieri was our regular goalkeeper, but with everything that had happened with the North American Soccer League collapsing, all the players went off into, well, most of the players went off into indoor soccer, and we couldn't get the release of Tino. His club wouldn't release him to play in a World Cup. I mean, what was a World Cup anyway? And when he eventually did get in, he came in days before we had our first game. And it was a no-brainer because Paul was very well prepared, done well, playing in the national team in some of the warm-up games. But it must have been, Paul, for you, quite an ordeal, was it?
Yeah, I think what you said there, Tony, about when you're 27, 28, coming into your prime as a goalkeeper, you've got much more faculty. I think you're stronger in virtually every regard, except I think as a young keeper, you don't have that weight of expectation. And I think that was maybe the single thing that was in my favor as a young keeper, is that nobody expected us to do well against France. Nobody expected a young goalkeeper to play well or not. And, I think that helped in some regards. I honestly feel like as I got older and there was more expectations, we spoke at the top about the nerves that a goalkeeper sometimes feels because of the stress of that position. I feel that maybe got worse. And in the beginning with Canada, I didn't feel as nervous. It was a tremendous opportunity. I really appreciated that opportunity. It's something now that you look back on and no one can take away from you. And I'll be forever grateful that I did get that opportunity.
And we were very close to getting a result in that game. It was 0-0 with about 10 or 15 minutes to go. And would have been an incredible result if we had managed to tie France, who were the European champions. And they had some outstanding players. But we contained them for most of the game, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a fantastic team effort. Tony wouldn't say this, but our game plan frustrated the French. We had a couple of chances ourselves, and it was a game that really, I think, pinned the French back and made them respect Canadian soccer. And I think that despite the fact we didn't score in the tournament, that we walked away with a lot of respect from the rest of the world about how we did play.
Wow.
Great. And I think you might still hold that record. I'm not sure, Paul, as the youngest keeper to play in a World Cup. I'm not sure
either.
I'm not sure.
Here's an because it would be very at that level for a 20-year-old goalkeeper to play a World Cup. And Dan, you've seen a lot of goalkeepers and you've seen them at the national team level. Generally speaking, a goalkeeper starts coming into his or her own when they get into the late 20s.
That's true. That's correct. That was quite a rare happening, someone at that young age playing on the world stage.
In fact, I have some statistics in just from the 2008 European Championships. Out of all the players who were aged 29 and older, 47.9% were keepers, 29 defenders, 28% midfielders, and 17% strikers. So it seems that the further back you play on the field, from striker to midfield to defender to goalkeeper, the older you are. So that's a good thing for young keepers to know that it does take time. It is a process, and maybe they shouldn't be giving up at a young age. Dan, have you found that as well in different parts of the world?
I mean, it takes years to develop wisdom and knowledge and experience. And, the decision-making process that the goalkeepers are required to perform and assess during a game, there's so many different variables. And it's important while they're in their early cycles, early phases of development, that they're exposed to making decisions and to experiencing failures, and how do they rebound from them, and how do they cope for them, and how do they move and learn and grow from them. So obviously goalkeepers get better as they get older, not because they get stronger or they can fly greater distances or they can jump higher than ever before. It's because of what's happening above their eyebrows and below their hairline and making that crucial decision. And that's why goalkeepers, after their career, whether they continue on playing professionally or they get into the business world or they choose another arena, it's not unusual to see the success of goalkeepers outside of the soccer field just because of the responsibilities, the duties, the leadership, the communication, the athleticism, the sacrifice, commitment, the training disciplines. All these components really develop a holistic human being. And that's the beauty, I believe, of the art of goalkeeping is, not only are we developing a goalkeeper, but we're developing a father, we're developing a mother, we're developing a sister, a brother, and it just goes on and on and on. And they carry those traits, those characteristics that they learn through that process of developing to be the best they can be in one position onto life.
Oh, good points, Dan. When you look at it and see some of the goalkeepers who played in World Cup, Peter Shilton, who was the Italian who played for the Portuguese? Yeah. It's not unusual that they get to a stage where, obviously, when they get over 40, time is beginning to run out for them. And even the great Shilton in the latter years was having problem getting off the ground because that spring has gone. But the wisdom stays with them. I said to John when we were talking about what do we do as coaches in the preparation of our goalkeeper. Now, Dan, you've had the experience of being a national goalkeeper coach. You've been around the world. In my day, back then in the old country, we didn't have specialist goalkeeper coaches.
That's true.
And you know that changed. I can remember Alan Hodgkinson.
Yes.
He was the Scottish national goalkeeper coach. But for the first part of his goalkeeping career, he'd go to 2 or 3 clubs each week.
True. Joe Corrigan, remember Joe Corrigan? He did the same.
Yes, he did. You're right. And then clubs began to realise that they needed to have their own goalkeeper coach. Where are you coaching now, Dan?
Right now, what I've been doing, Tony, is really doing what I want, where I want, when I want, and with whom I want. I think we've reached a point in our lives where we can make those sort of decisions. I've been home now, Tony, for 1.5 years. My goal was always to go overseas, learn as much as I possibly could at the highest levels, and come back to the States and try to make a difference here. And for me, I get a lot of joy in training young goalkeepers. And when I say young, Tony, I'm talking about, 10, 12, all the way up to collegiate keepers. So I'm working with a few colleges, some high schools, some prep schools, private lessons, group lessons. And really now I'm in the transition of my career, and I'm more about the education than I am about the winning business of soccer. And as you know, Tony, as you know, Paul, the winning business is very much different than the developmental business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The challenge, Dan, and Paul, the challenge is that most coaches don't have a specialist goalkeeper coach to help them out. So what we've got to do is critical that we cater for the goalkeeper in the team coaching session.
Yes.
And there are obviously different ways of doing that, and you can have warm-up practices that involve goalkeepers.
Of course.
That helps. And then the old attack against defence phase of play is something that we do as a team coach. That involves the goalkeepers, but I think what they need as well, and you can speak to this, Dan, is that they need personal attention. And Phil Parks, who we brought to Vancouver many years ago, became NASL Goalkeeper of the Year 2 years running. And he'd been at Wolverhampton, who were a very successful team. At that time, becoming successful again. But he said, in his days at Vancouver, he said, I've never had any goalkeeping coach. So he was at Wolverhampton, a big club, and got no personal attention at all. And what we can do as coaches is factor some personal attention in, even at the end of the session. So what I would do when I was coaching our son, he wasn't a goalkeeper, but I would tell the parents of the goalkeepers that we're going to stay for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the end of your practice, and give them some personal attention.
And Tony used to do that for me in particular with the national team. He is the national team coach, but he would stay around with me at the end and make sure I got at least 10 or 15 minutes of personal coaching. And I wrote for you, John, didn't I? Something, a brief thing about, I think it was entitled, "Don't Bore the Goalkeeper," or something like that, where don't just throw the keeper off. And I'm talking about young coaches now with younger teams. Don't just send the goalies off on their own to get themselves. You need that personal attention, whether it's an assistant coach or whether, as Tony says, bring them into the phase of play stuff, even if it means they're using their feet to start with. They want to be part of the team. They want to be engaged. They want to be challenged, and they need some personal attention.
And you're making me reflect, Tony. Back in 92, 93, the Portuguese national team was here in Connecticut, and I approached the Portuguese Club of Hartford, and I asked them if they were interested in hosting their heroes, and they were all excited. So I served as a liaison between the Portuguese national team, U.S. Soccer, and the Portuguese Club. And I had the opportunity of meeting Carlos Queiroz, who very few people know was a former goalkeeper. So I simply asked him, if Portugal can produce Eusebio, Figo, Cristiano Ronaldo, the best players in the world, ranked by FIFA, why can't they produce world-class goalkeepers? So we came to the conclusion that there wasn't a system within the infrastructure that devoted itself to the development of creating elite goalkeepers. So I was persistent, and I was able to go to Portugal and et cetera. And I was surprised to discover that I was the only goalkeeper coach in Portugal at the time. Now, since that time, the clubs all have goalkeeper coaches, but we all know that training goalkeepers isolated from the team on a separate island has its merits, has its impact, especially on the technical and the training ethics and the communications and partnerships that are very specially formed between a goalkeeper coach and a goalkeeper. However, we also know the best goalkeeper coach is the game. So they need to be engaged. They need to be in synergy and harmony with the game as a whole to maximize their potential.
Agree. Yeah. Gameplay is the most
interesting. Paul's been through this. That what we have with the Canadian team, Kevin Muldoon, who was the equipment manager, and I used to send him off with the goalkeepers.
I remember that. I remember this. I remember
eventually became
coach was an equipment manager of the national team. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. No, and he became the national goalkeeper coach.
Right.
He did a very good job, Paul, didn't he?
He did. I'll tell you why he did, is because he took a keen interest in developing his education around it. I remember he went to Ajax and he watched sessions there, and he watched coaches there, and he spoke to coaches there and at Liverpool as well. And even though he'd never played the game, he took a huge interest in it, made it a focus of a way that he could stay involved with the national team at that level, as well as doing his regular administrative duties. And the other thing that he had that maybe many people didn't realize is the best delivery of any striker in the country. Wow. Because he had those dodgy ankles and he could whip balls.
The problem was, Dan, he got problems with his feet, and you couldn't tell which way he was kicking it.
Can't anticipate.
He was a very good striker of the ball, wasn't he?
Fantastic. Very accurate, top corner stuff. And most importantly, someone who was paying attention to the keeper to warm you up, to get you prepared. And I give a lot of credit to Kevin for helping me out through my days with the national team.
Yeah, that partnership is special.
Yeah.
Thinking about preparing for a game, I just want to switch to that. Mental preparation before a game. What things would you be doing as when you guys were keeping? Also, I'm assuming I as a keeper, I used to try and study my opponents as much as possible, try and figure out their tendencies and also the strengths, my strengths and weaknesses. I wasn't very tall, so my strength was not very good on coming out for crosses. So I relied on communicating with my defenders and making sure that as the ball was crossed, they all knew who I expected to get to the ball. So that's mental preparation. And what kind of things, we'll start with Tony, what kind of things would you do before a game to prepare for a game?
Isn't that directed to Jan?
Yeah, Tony, start with you. We'll work our way around.
It's so important to have that mental preparation. And in the end, Dan, and you've been close to it through the years, when you become a goalkeeper, a striker, a winger, you live the life. And you know, I used to remember that on a Friday night before a game, back in the old country in the top division, I'd be uptight and wouldn't sleep very well in preparation, in anticipation of the game the next day. So I would always go to bed early on a Thursday when I could sleep. And then if I didn't get much sleep on a Friday, it didn't matter. So I had to get the mind right, and you know, that's critically important. But the other factor too, Dan, and you've seen this at the level you've been coaching, that if a goalkeeper makes a mistake, how do they deal with it? And a lot of goalkeepers, young goalkeepers, will crumble if they make an error, whereas a more experienced goalkeeper will say, that happens, it's not going to happen very often, but it does happen, and they get on with the job.
For sure.
Push this to Paul before I get to you, Dan, because I wanted to take something, elaborate on your situation. So, Paul, go ahead with that preparation for a game.
I think, and more you see it today, it's with all players, the professional attitude. And I know that's kind of a generic answer for you, that everyone does their own thing individually. What did I do as a goalkeeper? Well, I tried to be as professional as I could throughout the week as well, and with a full attention to the upcoming game. I didn't really have any specific rituals. I mean, I suppose we all have our game day rituals. I didn't nap during game day or anything like that, but everything that you did in preparation for the game that week was with a view towards making sure that you were at your optimum ability. And so, you know, there wasn't, you weren't carelessly wasting energy doing things that you didn't need to be doing. You were preparing and training the way that you should be, and obviously with food and sleep, as Tony suggested there. I remember Tony saying before the World Cup final, the first game, that don't stress too much about how much sleep you get, because you have been well prepared up to this point. So just put your head down and do what you normally do. I was rooming with Randy Samuel, and we spent a couple of hours that night just lying on our backs talking about what was about to happen, and you know, and relishing that opportunity. So I didn't have anything really specifically prepared or ritualized, I guess, that I would do before games, except just to make sure that it was an ongoing process throughout the camp or throughout a club season to make sure that you're ready for every game.
Differently to you, Paul, what I used to do before, I felt that I needed to have a good workout 2 or 3 days before a game. And if for any reason I didn't, I can remember 3 o'clock in the morning when I was in Her Majesty's Royal Air Force near Middlesbrough. I'd been on what we call a night exercise and finished at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I went out onto the soccer field, and no one to shoot at me, but I imagined that I was playing in goal, diving all over the place.
That's commitment.
Help me get my mind right for the game on the Saturday.
Yeah, you want to get a blowout on a Wednesday or Thursday, don't you?
Yeah.
So Dan, I'm going to throw this one to you. The other question I wanted to ask you is because you've worked all over the world. Certainly, when you're in Iran, you have different religious beliefs, and you have periods of Ramadan there as well, where they can't eat or drink. So preparation for you personally, and then your experience working in different parts of the world.
Well, I've been blessed. I've worked on 4 continents, and I always like to pay tribute to the people that I was fortunate to be surrounded by. People who believed in me. They shared their experiences and wisdom with me. They gave me opportunities to learn and grow. So nobody can do it alone. And I'm sure Paul would agree with that, and Tony would agree, and as well as you, John. We need to be surrounded by people, who are mentoring us and who are nurturing us. And I'm just forever grateful. And one of the best mentors, heroes, best friend that I had the privilege of working with was my father. My father was a professional goalkeeper in Portugal, played for Benfica, and he shared his passion and his attention to detail and his training ethics. I remember being at Colts Park in Hartford, and one day he brought a bag of balls. You know the way it was those days, Tony. At the penalty spot, he'd volley balls to me, and I'd catch. But on this particular day, I let all the balls go in. He said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." He goes, "Well, let's do this again." Took all the 12 balls, volleyed them into the net. I let them all in. He says, "What's wrong?" And I just said, "Dad, you can't score on me anymore unless I want to." He said, "Really?" He picked up all the balls, put them in a bag, drove off in his car. It took me an hour and a half to walk home. The sad part about it, guys, is I lost my best goalkeeper coach. He never trained me again. What a hard lesson in humility. So that's why I love these educational podcasts and learning. I'm so grateful to be part of this panel here. I mean, Paul and Tony and yourself, John, have all had great careers. And this is all about, and they know this, it isn't about them. It isn't about me. It's about all of us. And the more we share, the more we grow. Regarding the cultures, every culture was different. When I worked in Japan, they're very methodical, very disciplined. So the pregame warm-up, Paul, it had to be precise. In other words, if Ito, who played for the national team of Japan, if he said, and we decided it was 12 volleys, if I stopped on the 11th, he would freak out. It'd have to be the 12th, because he reflected his culture, which didn't have much fantasy or imagination. Most of them are directed to a pathway that people choose for themselves. So not much creativity. Training Tony Miola as an example. I mean, Tony wouldn't move on to the next activity until he felt he was ready for. John Walker, his warm-up was standing in the middle of the field juggling a ball, and I'd be freaking out. How is this guy going to be preparing, for the match? In Portugal, when you're working with a Portuguese national team and they're usually ranked in the top 5 of the world, the expectations are much different in Portugal than they are in Iran. So, losing is unacceptable. The nation, 12 million people are on your shoulders, on your back. Every pass, every tackle, every catch, every goal conceded or scored is being, evaluated under a microscope. So the psychological training in that atmosphere is much different than in Iran, where the expectations are not as high, yet they're playing for their people. They love their people. There isn't much for the country to celebrate except through sports. So in wrestling, weightlifting, and in football and soccer, the joy and the happiness of the country and its citizens is depending on results. So although these players, through sanctions, were not able to play against the opponents we wanted to, couldn't receive the teams that we wanted to play against in Iran because of visa issues, the only thing that motivated them was the love for the game and the love for their people. Getting back to the previous question, Paul, you've mentioned the word process several times now, and I'm a real believer in that. And in preparation prior to a game, I like to teach my students, and it depends on the culture. You go to Portugal and you talk about mental work, psychological work, Tony, you're talking to superstars that are multimillionaires. So When Scolari's coaching the Portuguese national team, when I was there, he did a psychological written test for all the players. He'd bring in a sports psychologist. Figo decided not to do it. So what are you going to do, Tony? You're the head coach. What are you going to do? You know, but when you go to Iran or other countries where, you know, South Africa, where the expectations are not as high, the players follow the rules and they're more receptive. So I believe in creating a mind's eye video. In other words, what I tell my students is go through your career in detail, intimate detail, write it down, the best cross, the best dive, the best distribution, the best 1v1 in intimate detail. What do I mean by that? What was the weather like? What were you wearing? Who did you play against? How did they react to you when you made that brilliant save? And now once you put the script, now at night you make the mind's eye video. And then I'd like to have our goalkeepers do that as a process, whether they're on the bus, whether it's the night before, or they're getting dressed in the locker room. Why is that important? Because they're actually have played the game mentally and are confident knowing that they've done everything successfully that the goalkeeping position requires, that now you're hoping they're going to execute it in the match.
Well, I'd do something similar as a goalkeeper. I would write up my assessment of my performance after the game. And I wouldn't be too critical. If I've done well, I'd tell myself I've done well. And if I've made a mistake, I've made a mistake, but I've recovered from it, or not recovered from it. I did that throughout my career. So I was assessing myself all the time, but not being too critical, because we've got to realise, all of us working with goalkeepers, they're going to make mistakes. The best goalkeepers make the fewest, generally speaking. But being right in your mind, I mean, what I'd do as a youngster back in England, living near Liverpool, I would get the newspapers, and in England at the time, I wouldn't read the front page. That would be about the Cold War and things in Russia. Go to the back page, which is all sport, and inevitably, certainly during the season, should be a photograph, usually of a goal being scored. But I used to clip them and evaluate them, if it looks as if the goalkeeper got his body shape wrong and he looked as if he was out of sorts, I'd make the comment. And I claim that I was lucky because I never had a goalkeeper coach. I did actually. I had the guy who took me into the game as a professional. A guy called Bertie Godwin, who came and scouted for us at Vancouver. But he was an old-fashioned English centre forward, and he could see good goalkeepers and bad goalkeepers from the other side of the bargaining table, and he gave me a lot of insights into goalkeeping.
Hey, Ricardo, I think we're going to be finishing up any moment now, but
that's it, yes.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask the panelists a closing question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Tony and Paul, as I mentioned earlier, I've been back for about a year and a half, and I've been traveling the United States, and I have some very, very deep concerns about where we're going with goalkeeping, in particular with the lost art of catching. I noticed that goalkeepers are getting recognized, complimented for simply being walls, deflectors, punchers, and boxers. They're transferring the indoor goalkeeping techniques and methods, hockey as well, onto the outdoor pitch, which we all know the dimensions are different in terms of field and goal size. And I'm really trying to challenge goalkeeper educators and coaches to not lose sight of what makes us special. We're the only players that can use our hands. Why can't we master that technique? Why have we lost that art? Yes, we are soccer players. Our feet are equally as important, but I just think it's become so disproportionate where we got a better field player in goal than a better goalkeeper in goal. What do you guys think?
Do you mind, Tony, if I touch on this one first? Because I'm going to reference something that you said to me at one point. Because I think there's a middle ground. Because I'd agree, Dan. You know, we used to have a situation where every goalkeeper, if he could touch it, was expected to catch it. And then I remember a period of time when perhaps with the technology of the balls and the ability to strike the ball more quickly, I remember, Tony, you saying this specifically to me. I don't know if you remember. You said you were in England and you asked Paul Barron, why are English goalkeepers not as prevalent in the Premier League as they used to be? And he said it's because all the goalkeepers are still trying to catch everything and they're spilling stuff, right? So I think there's an in-between here, Dan, because I'm going to go the other way on you now, too, is that...
Please do.
This year, I had the opportunity to commentate with TSN on every Whitecap home game, and away game for that matter. And the young Canadian keeper who played for the Whitecaps this year by the name of Maxime Crépeau showed me that you can catch the ball again, and that there is I think a heavy reliance too much on just pushing balls away and deflecting balls and not catching crosses. Everything that he touched this year stuck to his hands. And in traffic or hard shots along the ground or in the air. And so I think it went to the extreme where I don't want to take a chance that I'm going to spill something, so I'm just going to move it on. And in some respects, I don't have a problem with that if you are in traffic and it's a moving ball, and the safest play is to move it out of danger rather than the fear of leaving crumbs. But I agree with you, Dan. I think it went too far to the extreme where everything was punched away. Easy catches were left open for rebounds or corner kicks that ended up being goals. And I think somewhere in between is probably where we should be heading.
Guys, we have 30 seconds more for Tony.
I'd like to hear Tony's opinion on this.
No,
Okay.
I think Paul really summed that up well. But we'd love to see, Dan, goalkeepers who can catch the ball. And I agree with you, Paul. I was impressed with the goalkeeper of the Whitecaps. He had a good season, didn't he?
Yeah.
And if you can catch it and secure it, that's the way to go. Sometimes you can't, but I think you summed it up well, Paul.
I mean, the fear of making a mistake is so great that I just see so many unnecessary balls being deflected or boxed or punched. And in American football, in the NFL, you have a wide receiver whose responsibility to catch the ball. The ball's thrown at him 50, 70 miles an hour. As soon as he captures the ball, he's going to be hit by a truck. And he's able to manage oftentimes to hold on to the ball. And I agree, Paul. I think there's extreme on both sides, but we have to find a balance. Why can't we take good athletes and refine their technical ability and shaping so that we bring back the class and the art and the elegance of goalkeeping rather than just being a wall?
Yeah.
We're producing walls that give up unnecessarily rebounds. And we know all the rules that have been involved from FIFA have all been to limit the goalkeeping. Look at the penalty kick now, keeping 1 foot on the goal line. I mean, that really reduces the opportunity of a goalkeeper to make a save. The ball, how light it's got, how it serves, but it's all about focus and concentration. Tony, I'm sure you did the same thing. I used to volley balls against a wall. That was my best partner, and I would eventually reach the point where I kick it as hard as I could, and I would hold on to it. Then I'd advance to a tree, another good goalkeeping partner, and it was round, and now I was working on reflections and reactions, and still focusing, because there's no greater feeling than a goalkeeper with the ball in his hands. He's the best player, or she's the best player in the world when the ball's in their hands.
I agree with you. And hitting against the wall and a tree, I had the good fortune of playing at Blackpool, which was a seaside resort. The seawall was 12 miles long, and it was built out of Pennine granite, so it was very uneven. So I would go in the afternoon down to the sands there when the tide was out, of course, and play against the wall, and I couldn't tell which way the ball was going to come off. So, you know, you got that element of surprise and reactions. But those are the things, Dan, you're right. You know, that's what makes a goalkeeper, doesn't it?
I agree. Sorry, Ricardo, go ahead.
Sorry, but we have to start another panel in 3 minutes. That's why I have to interrupt. I would like to thank Paul, Dan, Tony. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you also, John, for the wonderful moderation. I hope that I can see you guys soon. Thank you once again, and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.
Stay in touch, Paul and Tony. Let's stay in touch, guys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.